So what's up? I want to thank everybody first of all. My subscriptions have quadrupled since I started talking about artifacts. I know my channel's strange. It's got a lot of different things going on. My focus is music and archaeology, so my channel reflects a lot of that. And then just a lot of times open forum discussions about interesting topics that I'm in. But throughout my research over the last, I guess it's been about 12, 13 years now, on the collection centered around a stream in southeastern Pennsylvania, a tributary of the Delaware, a well-born stream that comes from the earth, the pennypack. And the pennypack is it's a Norwegian, Swedish pronunciation of a native place name for the stream, which originally was Penjaka. That meant that the swamp of the dead, or the lake of the dead. Could have been a burial area originally for the Algonquins, the original people in the lands, and then all the people proto-Algonquin and proto-native that we're still finding out about, and as we refer to them as the North American Neanderthals. But in this video, I want to fast forward to the colonial period, right before the colonial period, the Beaver Wars, early occupation, up to the late 1800s, and even currently with some of the bizarre things that we also find in association with the pennypack, the lost silver mines, the Susquehannocks, and a lot of other various groups that came after them that were using this land for different things. The first discussion in this video will center on trail trees and their significance. There has always been this misnomer that there was no symbolism, no written language, no communication that was left behind by the Native Americans. Now, we don't know that for sure. We might have just lost all records of it, because many of these tribes and groups, their histories have been wiped out by warfare, disease, inner fighting, and then when the Europeans got involved, all kinds of different allegiances and warfare between clans. And eventually it decimated the population, but it was mainly the smallpox that did that, that let the Europeans gather a foothold. It was more the unknown weapons they carried than their guns. It was the diseases that wiped out, more than a third, almost a half of the population along the East Coast, the Native American population. But the trail trees are very interesting. These are trees that are bent and shaped to form a very distinct symmetrical shape, and they're bent at a young age so that they'll grow bent. And these marked all kinds of things in speculation. And they're found all up the East Coast. They're all where Native Americans were. There's a ton along the Appalachian Trail. But these trail trees, there's even maps online you can get to see the known ones. There's a lot of known ones. Some of them are on major roadways still, because they were marking the trails prior. A lot of times they're on high areas of creeks and riverbanks, and you can even see these in floods. And they were thought to be a navigation tool, a tool that marks transition from high to low ground, from water to land. And the one that I'm showing you in this picture is a trail tree I'd known of for a long time, or a trysting tree, or a meeting tree, or whatever you want to call it. But it wasn't until I started researching trail trees, and then I found out, I knew about the K.G.C, or the Knights of the Golden Circle, which was a secret society, a secret group within Freemasonry that was sympathetic to the Southern cause at the very later stages of the Civil War and onwards. They apparently dispersed a huge treasure and buried treasure across the entire country, marked out by sophisticated Masonic trail markers, pointer stones, using parts of the landscape. And this society, this secret society within a secret society, strong with the South will rise again, they hid their treasures with these elaborate grid systems that you need a template to kind of figure out, and they marked a lot of paper trees, or as they called them, writing trees that don't have bark, that like poplars and birch trees, and even some sycamores sometimes, but the bark peels on those. So, but anyway, being a DMLA member as a child and almost getting into the Mason thing, I know a lot about the organization, how they communicate. Every lodge has their own symbols, their own language, own alphabet that they can communicate with one another from. And a lot of these symbols come from older languages, Greek, runes, Phoenician, but these symbols are only understood to those secret members. And this is in conjunction, this is a known thing. You can look up the K.G.C. It's associated with Jesse James and the treasures they found in association with him. And they adopted and started using some of these trail trees. They readopted it for their map, their treasure hiding purposes, and they called them hoot owl trees. And they often pointed to something, or they had stone markers at the foot of the tree. Now, oddly enough, this tree has a weird grouping of stones on the end. I also looked around the area, and it sits right at the division between where you can navigate and where you can no longer navigate. Beyond that tree is the thickest swamps. You can't go back there. It's a spot I tried to go back to when I was a kid. It's the only spot in the Pennypack I really haven't been able to explore. That and the area up further on the trail. There's another horrifying swamp area that no one really ever goes into. And this tree really helps you navigate the high ground around the swamp. And what is more interesting with the Native American connection with the trees, they're now finding that they're used to mark out places of exposed copper, silver, and iron ore, and also areas of rich flint and agate deposits. So they were used to communicate. They were an early form of language, almost symbolic or phonetic language, using these trail markers. And different bends, different twists could mean different things in the Native American lexicon. Now, if you move over to the K.G.C. theory, you have to look at some of these symbols, and I have pictures of them. You have one that is almost like the Pontius Pilate symbol, or that the P with the X through it. You have the big bubble letter looking cross, which is a known K.G.C. marker. You also have this bizarre way up further on the tree, which means it was way older. The carving was done way older. Or because it's so high up on the tree that even if you stood on top of a car, you can't reach this carving. So did someone get up on a ladder, or was it carved at a lower spot, and as the tree grew, it's up there now? That stands away from the other symbols on this tree. The tree also contains the letter CA, Confederate America, or Confederate States of America. And then as I was looking at this tree, taking pictures of it, examining it, I went back a few days later and realized someone had carved a bigger version of the CA letters underneath of the symbols. And this is right after I was really examining the tree. Now, this tree is literally the tree that holds the sign for the park, the no littering sign. It's actually bolted to the front of this tree. These trees, it's hard to tell their ages without doing core samples. They're in extremely swampy, acidic soil. They have very stunted growth. They're probably a couple hundred, 300, 200, 300 years old. It's hard to know that. And also with the K.G.C. thing, there were sentinels guarding these treasures, and apparently within, if you talk to really high-ranking Masons that have any kind of linkage to the knowledge of the K.G.C. that was operating within inside of them, they'll back everything up. So they'll tell you that there's still people out there to this day watching over these places of these deposited treasures. There's still sentinels watching. And what's bizarre about these symbols is they could have been hoaxed. Someone could have said, oh, there's a bent tree over here, I'm going to mess with people. So you have to look deeper. Who owned the land? What Mason ties were to the land? Were there any ties to known K.G.C. operators in the area? And this is where it gets a little hard. I just started this angle of research, and I like to research all angles when I find interesting things. I've taken pictures of the symbols in association with other K.G.C. areas. There's also the bizarre map stone that I called it. It's heart-shaped, like a human heart almost, like the actual organ. It's got the triangular trail symbol carvings, which I had already identified in prior videos as being a Masonic trail code of some sort. It's a pointer stone. It was found under a washout under a big root system of another tree with markings on it, slightly further downstream. Now, I don't know if it ties into the heart carving on the one tree. I don't know any of the treasure hunting stuff, and the people that go out looking for these K.G.C. buried deposits, they are successful, but it's a lot of speculating. Like, does this clue really lead to this next clue? Is that really a clue, or you just think it's a clue type thing? Well, with metal detectors and stuff, you might get an idea. There's definitely something laid out here. The map stone. There's a crazy marble stone marker up on the stream cut that leads to some of the abandoned mine and collapsed ancient mine entrances. And the trail tree is directly in between the two trees with the markings. The really bizarre marking is the one highest on the tree. It's a series of dashes with a cross of Lorraine in the middle, or a two-barred cross with two more dashes with a big S following it. Cross of Lorraine was used by the K.G.C. as one of their main symbols. I don't know what these symbols mean. I know that they're the oldest carvings on the tree, because you can tell by how dark and deep they are and how grown in things are. But I can't tell you that these things are 250 years old. I don't think they're that old, these carvings. 150 years. I have no idea. So I don't know. Also, some of the symbols have religious context to them, and there were a lot of Jesuits in the early 1800s when Christianity moved in, and they were trying to convert and baptize people along the creek. So could it have been marking a place where they went for baptism? Could this be an area of burials? There's mounded areas around. There's mounds around this area, whether they're old trees that fell down, or they're just from the old digging out the bed of the old road that's right there that they converted into the trail. What is interesting in doing back research with the K.G.C. angle is the area of land in the preservation that these finds occur on, with the tree, with the trail tree, and the ore. This is the back of Mason Mills Park flows out onto the far bank. That's the parkland. No one really goes in there because it's a swamp, but that's part of Mason Mills. All that land was bought and then donated or gifted to the community as a park. There's Masonic symbols all over that park. They own a lot of the land, and if Masons own the land, a secret sect operating inside of them, known as the K.G.C., could have very well had access to that land. It's going to take more deeper research of the old land grants in the area and stuff like that by me. Now, could it have been something older? Sure, trail symbols were used back even in the 1500s and 1400s by the Spanish and the Europeans, because they're based on a very old, simple system, some of the trail languages. And marker stones, map stones, have been used for hundreds and hundreds of years as well. If it does have K.G.C. ties, like the little triangle carving on the map stone with the skull and another K.G.C. symbol, that's another cool part of history. The actual tree that is the trail tree is ancient, probably 300 years old. So you're getting into the earlier or the later Native American, into when the colonial people moved in. You're talking about the time period up through the French and Indian, the Beaver Wars, into the Revolutionary War. So very, very interesting stuff with the trail tree, the Masons connection. And another interesting part, the only other Mason Mills Park along the East Coast is not really East Coast. Down south, it's in Atlanta, and it has ties to the K.G.C. So it's kind of very, very strange, and I don't want to make it sound like everything happened in this one area, but there's just so much history in this area, period. It was the spot first settled this area by the Europeans in the 1600s. The French were there, and I want to get into some of the colonial finds too that happened in the same deposits with hundreds and hundreds of Native American finds. Was this a meeting area, trading area, an area of conflict? Do not know. We find series of spoons from this early 1700s, silver spoons, some not full, handles. We find a really old pipe, 1600s, the cannon pipe, clay pipe. Others have been found along the Pennypack that are a little that are less old and are maybe 1700s. Some are even tied to Daniel Boone, I believe, either him or Davy Crockett. Daniel Boone had a cabin at the mouth of the Pennypack going into the Delaware. They found a hand knife of his in a pipe at some point. That's more down towards the city along the Pennypack. Really interesting that the trail trees are being tied to ore, and the ore is in direct association with this trail tree. I don't know. I like to research all angles. I have an open mind, being scientific about it. The area was obviously important to many different people and cultures because it's rich in resource, whether it be the ore, the pipestone, the creek itself, to power mills. A lot of activity. Like I said before, the Pennypack had the largest amount of grist mills at the time of the Revolutionary War. So I believe it was a major area of production for the colonial cause, for the patriot cause, because it was one area that was increasingly being taken over by the British and becoming Tory. This is one area that was sympathetic to the patriot cause, and it could have been a great resource to fund and fuel the war. Gunpowder, clothes, paper, everything you need, churning out a production factory. Now, what finds tie the early French to here? I like to call this theory the yellow brick road theory. Very into mushrooms. I studied them for longer than I've researched this collection and these finds. But there is a specific type of golden chanterelle that grows all along the ancient trail system, just in that area. And they have a mycorrhiza relationship, chanterelles. They grow in the root systems of hardwood and certain species of moss. They need to exist in the same area, and the conditions have to be right. Chanterelles are a favorite mushroom in the culinary world, and they have a French name that means ground flower. They were found, discovered, and eaten by the French, the German, the Europeans for probably 1,000 years before they got here. Hundreds and hundreds of years. It is my argument that through some spore analysis and some testing, if we could trace back the origin of those European chanterelles that are now growing on the root systems back there that have been there forever. They come up every year. I pick them. Chefs love them. I love them. They taste like lobster when you cook them up. They're amazing. Full of vitamin C, superfood. They didn't get here for no reason. The French were eating them or tracked spores on their clothing, or even the Dutch or the Spanish or the early Europeans that walked on these trails brought these spores to this area. So we find these golden chanterelles in an area. We can start looking for some older colonial stuff. It's a cool little tire, another layer of connection. And so are some of the glass tools you see pictured. The dark gray black glass is a leaded glass. It was only made in France for a while. Very thick. It was obviously shaped into a tool. It was napped. It was worked. There is also a piece of apothecary blue glass, cobalt blue glass. It's kind of used for apothecary by the French and English. That was shaped into a tool. There is an old, there's a glass bead or ornament that was chopped up and chipped into a point or an arrow. Of course, the domino pieces, both the black jet and the white ivory domino, the pipe, the spoons, the nails. These are all dating from that early colonial period, found in association with others in this bank that we find the pottery pieces of the Susquehannock in. And I believe that this area, this meeting area, where there's evidence of an old colonial fishing weir, you also find tons of triangle pendants, circle squares. It was obviously important to the Native Americans as well. It was either a trading area, and it was an area of great conflict. There's tons of layers of conflict archaeology, weapons, warfare weapons of different tribal groups. I can't really dig on the area. I've metal detected it a few times, gotten some hits up on the hills. But I'm really interested with all these different symbols, markers, and now after years tying this mapstone to this K.G.C. idea. And it was either something that somebody hoaxed, or it was literally something tied to the K.G.C., or it could have been early Christian, or they could just be random carvings. But there's tons of carvings on trees back there, but not weird symbols like that. You know, this person loves this person, not C plus A in a circle with a cross of Lorraine and the southern S on the end, and it's just too many tires there. And they were across every state at the time. When the South will rise again, these were like little bank deposits, and so they could rise up factions at the end, towards the end of the Civil War, when the South was being strangled and it was being encircled and cut off all of its supplies. They got desperate. They started using acts of terrorism, and these buried banks all around in every state could be exploited or could be used in a terroristic or a coup or a spy project or something in terms of the South not losing the war and keep fighting on. And like I said, in the Mason community, there's a large amount of people that say, yeah, these sites are still being watched. For what reason? For who knows? But this is something that is right up the Masons' alley. Symbols and treasure hunts. It's something that they would do. But who knows if there's any context to that. If there is any treasure, I'm not a treasure hunter. You can't treasure hunt on a preservation, and that's another thing that ties to a conspiracy. Well, if you knew you put the treasure on a land preservation that no one could dig up or look into, that protects it even more. There's a lot of ties to the Masons. Now, could these symbols been prior to that? Could they have been an earlier European system? Absolutely. Like I said, the Masons, every lodge has its own codex or alphabet or language. So and these date back to the founding of Freemasonry. You know, and the founding of Freemasonry is simply when you became a master mason, you were given a free pass to go to any country in Europe to build the giant cathedrals at the time. You were not trapped as a citizen just in your country. You had free pass over any border or land, so you became a Freemason. And then it became a secret society, that got tied into the Knights Templars along the way and all this. But they're always after treasure, resource, and wealth. And if there were silver mines in the area, maybe that's what all the symbols are pointing to, an area to exploit a monetary resource. But I thought that I just wanted to put out another little video, more fascinating stuff coming out of the same area. And to reiterate, the actual trail trees, they weren't created, or the hoot owl trees, they weren't created by K.G.C. members. They were created well before that. When the tree was a sapling young, it was bent and it was shaped, and it meant different things, and that was a Native American thing. The K.G.C. just utilized these already bent trail trees to further use a marking point to start a treasure hunt. It's a land marker. Like, what are you going to use as a land marker in the forest? You got something that sticks out but hides at the same time. A funny looking tree that you only know its meaning, and because you shaped it. It's a very clever concept. It's not a concept that just the Native Americans practice. I mean, this concept of trysting trees goes all the way back to the Celts, goes back to Europe. It was being used as a marking system for a long time. But I hope you guys enjoy. Whether you hate it or you don't, let me know. The haters always hate. Lovers always love. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, my ultimate goal is to bring other people in that have found similar things and ultimately collaborate enough to put patterns together and maybe try to find some of these lost cultures, better understanding or filling in missing pieces to some of these groups that have sadly been lost to history in a lot of respects. Thank you. Thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, as always, if you haven't, please just hit that subscribe button. It would be huge. Huge, huge, huge. Love you all. Thank you. Peace out. Stay safe out there. And happy hunting.